Hello and welcome to the second episode of The Quest for the Best. This time we have another bunch of movies to talk about in a free-form discussion-based format, just to tide you over until the next fully edited, fully scripted video. So this episode we're going to be talking about Alien Covenant, Manchester by the Sea, Tower, Raw, and Logan. I will not be talking about spoilers unless stated otherwise, so let's begin. Jesus, Alien Covenant. Where to begin with this one? A bit of context, I suppose. So, my favourite movie, or one of my very favourite movies, is Ridley Scott's Alien, the original Alien. Simplistic, stylistically wonderful, it's creepy, the acting's amazing, it feels real, it's tense, it still holds up to this day, apart from the odd little silly effect, which you can forgive. But overall, it does hold up very well. Fast forward to now, and we have the Alien franchise as this complete mess. We have two amazing films, and we have Alien Cubed, which I used to really hate, but I actually don't mind as much anymore. I just find it interesting as a kind of David Fincher project that went a bit wry because of the studio interference and whatnot. And then Alien Resurrection has a couple good scenes, but it just feels like a Joss Whedon movie with aliens in it, and it doesn't really work. Then we have Prometheus. Yes, I'm not including the AVP films. Prometheus I do like more than I dislike. The story is all over the place and the characters are incredibly stupid, but I think there are more positives than negatives in that film. The cinematography is gorgeous, the effects work is amazing, the soundtrack works really well, and it has characters like David, who was the main android, who are truly interesting and are very entertaining to follow throughout. So I was quite optimistic for Alien Covenant. I was excited even, because I figured, well, seeing as this is no longer Prometheus 2, it was Alien Covenant, or before that it was, Alien Paradise Lost, which I do think would be a better name for it, but ultimately it doesn't matter because I really do not like Alien Covenant. I really don't. I want to say I hate it, but I think I need to see it again first. But my initial reaction was I did not like that film very much at all. Unlike Prometheus, where it has things I can point at and say, those things were excellent. In Alien Covenant, there are far few things. Sure, there are some decent scenes. Sure, there are things you can point at and say that there is of quality. For example, I think one of my favorite things from this movie is the soundtrack. It blends themes from the original Alien along with the Prometheus theme and with its own original music as well, and I think it really is effective. The new kind of creepy alien theme that was made for this movie is really, really terrifying. Just hearing it on its own freaks me out. But the problem really is when everything comes together in this movie, because it wants to do so many things at once, it ends up being the kind of jack of all trades, master of none movie. It wants to be a horror movie, it wants to be this thoughtful science fiction movie, it wants to be an action movie at times, and it wants to be a drama with all these emotional elements, but none of them hit. And the conceit is cool. If any of you have played or heard of Mass Effect Andromeda, where it's about humans, like a sect of humans, being sent off into deep space to find a planet to colonize. It's a similar story here. It's a group of people, they're on their way to a planet, things happen, aliens get involved, you can see where this is going. And the simplicity of that plot does make it sound very alluring and makes it sound interesting. But the problem is, for the first act, it spends the whole time building up this crew, kind of explaining who they are, just getting you used to the world again. But then after shit starts hitting the fan, then it kind of devolves into a sequel to Prometheus all of a sudden, and it's jarring, and it's weird, and it flings the focus in a completely different direction, and characters are just being stupid, making dumb decisions, changing the way you thought they were into suddenly flipping into, like, the main character, for example, is somewhat just normal at the beginning, like just a normal woman. And then when it gets to the point in the movie where it's like, remember Ripley? Then she just becomes Ripley, and that was very expected and dull. One of the most disappointing things is the way the effects were handled, because some people just aren't mentioning this, but in my opinion, the effects work is not very good on this movie. I'd go as far as to say it's outright bad at times. Some of the creatures in this movie and the way they're shot and the way they're lit, along with the type of CG they're using, makes it look terrible. The first time you see one of these creatures, is in like a med bay. It's really well lit. You can see it all really clearly. So when this little CG creature climbs out of this character, because it's so well lit and the way it's shot and everything, it just looks silly. It looks ridiculous. And then what they make this little creature do on top of that is silly as well. It's so bombastic. It's so ridiculous. They move so quickly and with so much energy that when you combine it with the human actors, it just looks wrong. It baffles me that Ridley Scott, the director of the best Alien movie, in my opinion, who treated the alien creature in the first movie with so much respect. Sure, that's probably a mix of having a rushed production and being limited by the type of effects work that was actually possible at the time, but the point still stands. Because of those limitations, the way the alien was used in that first movie made it much more effective as a horror movie. And Alien Covenant is listed as a horror movie, but there's nothing horrific about it apart from the odd bit of gore, which is a shame because the first act of the movie does build up the suspense really well. It makes you're waiting for something to go wrong, because you know this is an alien movie, aliens are going to show up, something bad's going to happen, and you're waiting for it to unfold. And the moment this movie lost me was the first moment an alien showed up, or a creature, or whatever you want to call it, because that's when characters start behaving in ridiculous ways that no one ever would. It's when you see the bad effects, it's when you see the bad camera work and lighting, the bad cinematography in terms of the action. I thought it was all over the place in terms of that. And on top of being this very silly gore fest with aliens running around and all this stupid shit, at the same time it tries to be this really thoughtful science fiction piece about like androids and their creators, and when the creator and androids that want to create life and the meaning of life and all of these grand themes and ideas, and through some just ridiculous visual imagery that if you've seen the film you will know what I'm talking about. These fucking visual metaphors which are just so ridiculous and go against things that have been set up in the Alien films since his original movie, that it just leaves you saying, what? That did not work. That was all over the place. I'm just pissed off. There's even a scene where the xenomorph is climbing down this ladder, this chute thing, and the CG work is so appalling. You can actually see the spines on its back morph through the floor like a fucking video game. This is the kind of level we're talking about here. In the trivia section for this movie on IMDb, it mentions that Ridley Scott finished principal photography in merely 74 days for $111 million. And I've gotten this impression from Ridley Scott for a long time now that he's kind of he makes movies in this really workmanlike fashion. Like he does it one shot and then he's done. He's all about, I want to get this done. I don't care if there are little things here and there that could be done better if we just spent more time on it. We are moving along so we can get this done. And there is an admirable quality to that, and I guess the studios like it. That's why he keeps getting work all the time and how he's able to get movies made. But the script and where the story goes and the dialogue and just everything I've mentioned makes it feel really unsatisfying as an Alien movie. I figured this was gonna be going back to basics, almost being a soft reboot of Alien with a lot of fun gore, great set design, and creepy moments, but you really don't get that. You get the odd kind of entertaining kill, but by the end of it you just ask yourself, what was the point of that? I got nothing out of that. Like, what was the point? Yeah, I get all your visual metaphors. Yeah, I get that this is just a dumb monster movie at the heart of it, but I didn't think the xenomorph could be less scary as like a pop culture creature than it already is. But Alien Covenant managed to make the xenomorph even less scary to me. And the reason it pisses me off so much is because it had me so sold from the majority of that first act. I was genuinely intrigued. I was on the edge of my seat in terms of tension. I was waiting to be creeped out. I was loving it. Then it all just collapses so fast. I know this movie's been quite divisive with just about everyone. Everyone seems to be on a completely different page with it. And unfortunately, I have to fall down on the side of just not enjoying it. Maybe there'll be a director's cut thing released at some point, kind of like the longer, different version of Alien 3 that you can find, which might make it less dumb at points or more effective or whatever, but it's not going to fix anything about this movie. It's just a shame. And the only positive thing I could see about this is maybe the sequel, which, come on, it's probably going to get a sequel, isn't it? Just put Alien on anything and it's going to make a fucking $1 trillion. But yeah, a potential sequel, now that they've kind of got what they're going for out of the way almost, may lead to something more interesting, but man, they really have to win me back after this. So if you're a massive Alien fan like I am, I would say you probably should see it. You've probably already seen it. But if you're someone who doesn't really care about Alien and just wants a really good horror movie / creature movie. There are much better ones aside from this. I would skip this. If you're frustrated by characters just being so ridiculous and unrealistic, then this is definitely not a movie for you. So I'm going to have to not recommend this one. So Manchester by the Sea. Don't know how else to put it apart from, wow, I really, really like this movie. One of the most depressing films that I've ever seen. It is so bleak. If you're looking for a fun movie for the family, this is not it. If you're looking for a fun date movie, this is not it. It's one of those movies where I don't think you should do any research if you haven't heard about it already. I wouldn't even read the plot synopsis or anything. I would just watch it if you just want a really good drama, because there's something in the movie that is revealed that I already knew, I think through just reading a plot synopsis somewhere, and that scene would have been even more powerful if I didn't know what was coming. Didn't take anything away from the scene necessarily, but it would have been nice if it hadn't been ruined for me. There's something I find really satisfying about these slow, plodding, methodical, just character pieces about just a person who just has things happen to him and things just get worse and worse, and things are slowly drip fed to you, and as you find out about this guy and his family, and it's heartbreaking. It's really sad. It's not a movie with much style. It's all very slow, plodding, relatively flat. It's very simplistic, and it's how it's supposed to be. It's not really a knock because it seems like the movie was supposed to be that way. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes long, and at points it might drag for you if you're not into this kind of thing, but the real strength is the acting and the script, because it feels real. Not for a moment did I think these were actors. I thought it was so convincing. Across the board, Casey Affleck, his brother in the movie, Carl Chandler, Michelle Williams, just everyone in it is fantastic. It's definitely one you have to be in the right mood to watch, and you have to be prepared for how miserable it is. But overall, I think it's a very effective movie and achieves exactly what it was trying to achieve, and I would highly recommend it if anything about what I just described is remotely appealing to you. Tower is probably the best documentary I've ever seen. No exaggeration, and I've been on like a documentary kick lately. This is by far the most effective one. Maybe that's just because I'm a sucker emotionally for when they can kind of present things in a certain way to make you sad. But the brief premise is about the mass shooting in 1966 in the University of Texas, in the big clock tower there, where this maniac he just climbed to the top, barricaded himself up, and just started shooting at civilians. But the thing about it is, because it was in the 60s, they don't have that much footage, so they have a bunch of interviews from people who were there. But as far as footage goes, they've only got little snippets and clips. So the really interesting thing that this documentary does is they do this technique called rotoscoping, I think it is, where they use actors to recreate a bunch of scenes of what's being described and of footage of things that were happening at the time but they didn't have any footage for. And it almost looks cartoony. It's like drawing over every frame. So it has this really stylistic, almost like cartoony, comic booky flair to it. And the way they play around with that technique, specifically towards the end as things start wrapping up, is used so effectively for this emotional gut punch at a certain point where it's like, goddamn. It has some of the best pacing I think I've seen in a documentary. It really is on the edge of your seat stuff. It's really tense. And I was reading all about it after the fact. I'd never heard of this event before, but it kind of dives into a handful of different people's hellful day of when this shooting took place. It's from their perspective. They talk about what they were doing at the time, how they were communicating with people, how everything was just a panic. It's all incredibly interesting despite how sad it is. God, this is like the depression episode. If this doesn't bring a tear to your eye, I would quite frankly be amazed. It really is an amazing documentary, and it's nice, and because the pacing's so good, along with the running time being only an hour and 36 minutes, it flies by in the best of ways possible. And once it's over, you just sit there like, wow, that was really great. And hopefully this is one some of you will watch if you've never heard of it. By the looks of things, it's not that well known. I know it did well critically, but it only has about 3,000 votes on IMDb, which usually is a little bit of an indicator of how many people are watching it. So I really would recommend that. You don't even have to be a fan of documentaries specifically because of how unique this one is. It goes far and beyond what you would expect. I hope I'm not selling it too much, but I would definitely recommend it. We have the French film Raw, which is a horror movie about a young vegetarian who goes to vet college, and they have a bunch of weird hazing rituals and things start to happen to her. I know that's incredibly vague, but this is one of those films where you could kind of spoil it for someone if you say too much about it. So I'm going to do my best to not do that, because I did really enjoy Raw. Once I finished it, at first I was a little bit undecided in terms of, did I like that? I was definitely striking in a lot of ways, but did I actually like it? And I have come down on, yeah, that was actually really enjoyable. So of course the film is French, so they speak in French, so it is subtitled, so be aware of that. And I never feel like I can be totally fair about commenting on the acting in foreign films, because, to be honest, I can't tell the inflections, I can't tell the delivery necessarily. You can tell a lot of the body language and how convincing that is, and all of that was good in this movie. But as far as acting goes, I mean, it seemed good to me, but maybe if any of you are bilingual or something, can speak French, you might say, that guy there was terrible or something, but because you're someone like me can only speak English, I'm mostly looking at the subs, so I won't be able to comment on something like that. But the real point of this movie is the horror factor. I know it was kind of being sold as, this is making people throw up in the theater, this is the most extreme thing you've ever seen, and that's how it was sold to me when I went to see it, and it is a little bit misleading. I wouldn't go in with that kind of expectation. But with that being said, there are some sequences in this movie which are frightening and graphic and really, really fucking disgusting. Far more effective with gore and the horror of gore than something like Alien Covenant was, which was just silly. I don't think this ever quite goes into the silly, stupid territory. It's just, oh my god, that is horrible, and I was not expecting that kind of stuff. I was worried at first that it was going to be one of those movies where nothing is really explained to you, but luckily, towards the end, things start to make sense. Information is revealed to you that make you say, oh, okay, I get it now, I get it. And it has just a really great ending. I love endings like this in movies. I'm obviously not going to say it, but the best word I can think of to describe it is striking. There are scenes that will make your skin crawl, and a lot of it is really effective. I guess my problems with it, though, are pacing is a little bit off sometimes. Sometimes you're wondering, okay, how does this scene link to that? Where is this going? Confused me a little bit. Maybe someone can answer this in the comments, but this takes place at like a vet university place, which I mentioned earlier. It just something about it seems quite unrealistic to me in terms of how extreme everything was presented. Like, I don't know if it's really like this in France or not, but some of the shit, like these hazing rituals or whatever, are really ridiculous, and I just can't imagine happening at a university in the UK, like the equivalent. But I've never been to vet school, so I don't fucking know. I highly doubt it's like this. But besides that, I think it is an effective, weird, creepy, disturbing, and almost funny at times. My audience was screaming with laughter at points because I don't think they knew how else to react. And I was with them at times. I was like, fuck, that is... So if you're okay with it being a foreign film, because I know some people are weird about that, I wouldn't say it's great. I'd put it in a good sort of category. I don't know, I'm not going to rush back to see it anytime soon kind of level, but definitely a unique experience. Fans of horror and gore will probably really enjoy this. So the community pick for this episode is Logan, a movie I've been probably the most suggested movie I was asked to talk about for this, because of course I've mentioned previously that I'm kind of getting fed up of superhero movies. I've got the superhero fatigue, but Logan I really fucking like. It's, in my opinion, one of the best superhero movies in a long time. I want to say since The Dark Knight, to be honest. And when I say superhero movies, I know there are better superhero movies that are more true to kind of a certain style of comic, like The Avengers, for example. That's a completely different tone to this, but this is the kind of thing that really gels with me. Really serious, violent, all about characters and the way they interact with people. That's my kind of thing. And in a lot of ways, Logan is hardly even a superhero movie. It's more like a Western with Wolverine in it. And it has you right from the get-go, right from the really violent opening scene. And I was really worried that the violence was actually going to be distracting and used in such a way where, look, we can do violence now. Look, he can slice that guy's head off. Look, there's blood everywhere. And despite there being a lot of violent scenes, it's never too insane. It's never too ridiculous. It always feels grounded in the world we're being presented. This is probably my favorite X-Men movie overall as well. And I know it's hardly even an X-Men movie because it only has a couple of the actual X-Men in it, but I just love how minimal and focused and how things aren't over-explained to you. And even the stuff that would normally bug me in a superhero movie, like the really goofy stuff, just kind of makes sense in this movie. It just feels like it fits. The whole dynamic of Logan having to look after Professor X, and then the way he has to react to this kid character is all really compelling stuff. And while I am a sucker for this kind of really dark, violent, brooding story almost, I know that might actually be a downside for a lot of people. Some people want the goofy Wolverine with the bright yellow costume, running around being crazy with Cyclops and all the others, but this is not that movie. And I've heard complaints about this movie being too dark and too serious, and that's why they didn't like it. And I can understand that. If that's not what you're after, that's not what you're after. But I'm so glad this movie exists. It was so refreshing just to get that last ultra-violent Wolverine moment that we've all wanted since the beginning. And that's really what this film is. It's a send-off for Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Like, and I really do hope they just leave Wolverine alone for a bit. I know he's a huge moneymaker. I know the movies turned him into one of the most famous X-Men characters. But please, for the love of God, just respect this movie and just leave him alone for a bit. Don't recast him for a while at least. Don't have a Spider-Man thing going on. Just leave it alone for a bit. I was surprised by Stephen Merchant showing up in this. If you don't know who he is, he's a comedian from Bristol, which is a city in the UK. You probably know he was like Ricky Gervais a lot. But he was actually really good in this quite serious role. There isn't that much comedic relief. It is there. There's just enough to make it not completely hopeless and bleak. But man, I just got such an 80s action movie kind of vibe from this. And I thought Patrick Stewart was really excellent too. I find that he's like a very sympathetic actor and his voice can emote quite a lot. And surprisingly, I found this movie fucking got me emotionally too. Had a really, really good, really memorable ending shot as well. Really great. We gotta thank Deadpool for this too. Like, without Deadpool doing so well, we wouldn't have got this movie, or we might have got it, but it would have been a filtered, way less brutal version. And the brutality is like so necessary for this. It just helps accentuate how the character is feeling, how hopeless everything is, how dark everything is. I don't know what else to say. It was just a really enjoyable, brutal, sad. Again, this is the sad episode. Remember, every one of these fucking movies is sad in some way. But tastefully and artfully done superhero movie. Like it's such a good superhero movie. Like it's one of those things where you just forget that it is even a superhero movie and you're just watching like a drama. This is just a really well-filmed, interesting action drama. What is it about these like old man characters that are past their prime being so compelling? I don't know what it is, but it's just fucking awesome. I would definitely recommend this movie. I'd probably go as far as to say it's my favorite film I've seen this year so far. Bear that in mind, we're only in May at the time of me recording this, so that might change. And I mean, new releases, things I've seen at the cinema. So yeah, I'd recommend that one. Unless you hate Wolverine, in which case, why would you even ever be interested? So those are all my thoughts on a handful of movies. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you add your opinions to the comments. I found it quite interesting to see other people's thoughts on what I said last episode. I know a few people were annoyed by some of my opinions on a couple of the movies because I didn't explain myself well enough, but to be fair, I'd actually recorded that video before, but I lost the audio, so I had to re-record it, and by then it had been such a long time since I've seen a couple of the movies, and I really didn't want to watch fucking, what was it called, The Neon Demon and shit like that again, so I just tried my best to remember. Maybe it wasn't a fair representation, but I could remember my vague feelings about it. Hopefully I was a bit more thorough this time. So yeah, tell me your opinions of these movies in the comments below, what you agree with, what you disagree with. My overall pick for this episode has got to be Tower, I think. I think if I wanted to show someone a movie and really impress them out of this bunch, I would show them Tower, and I think it's one that needs a bit more attention thrown its way because I think it's really good. So thanks for watching. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. I'll see you on the next video. Bye!